Hi, it's Rachel with Stirring the Deep. In this video, I want to talk about putting on those garments of righteousness and what that process looks like. And I'm sharing with, according to the Word, and a little bit with my personal experience of this. Because as the day of the Lord dawns, you want to be wearing the wedding garments, which is the righteousness of God, and which is also love, because God is love. And walking in right-mindedness or righteousness is walking in true love. And you really need to learn what true love is, because the love of this world can be completely marred. So one of the first things you have to realize when you're learning to walk in God's righteousness and in His love is that your concepts of love are not correct. And you need to learn about love from God, be taught by Him, because no one can teach you the deep truths of God, because it is an individual process. That is what the new covenant is about. God writes His truth on each one of our hearts. And He goes deep into our spirit and starts revealing the lies. Because remember, your lie right now, or a lie in your spirit, is your truth. So you're even blind to that. But if you will start seeking God with a heart willing to let go of all that you've known and say, God, I want to learn the truth, and I'm willing to let go of anything that I've held on to, that I've believed, that's not of you. So you have to have that humbleness to be taught by God. You have to be willing to let go of doctrines that you've learned in churches and religions. And I would say right now is a time, it is a very serious time, and time to get out of the churches, to leave the religion behind and embrace the Creator who created this world, who is life, who has given us His Spirit to teach us all things, who is beyond any image, that doesn't want to be put in a box, doesn't want to have images created Him, which wants true worship. And you only understand the fullness of who God truly is when you're willing to let go of all of those images. So it's so important to really embrace that. And if that's something that you totally disagree with, then I would suggest just take a break. Take, a couple of months and just focus on God, how honoring that would be to Him. And if anything, you'll be completely blessed by getting a foundation so strong in Him and learning to be taught by Him. Put aside all other teachings and all that other stuff and let God teach you, because that is the new covenant. And that's how true transformation happens, and that's what you need in these days. So I want to first read about these wedding garments, because only those who have the wedding garments, in which God is sowing right now for each one of us, if we're willing to listen to Him, those are the ones that are going to be able to stand as the eternal fire, which is Christ, which is God, which is coming to this earth, right? God is a consuming fire. Christ is coming with flaming fire. That Spirit of God that's coming to destroy all wickedness. And it says in Isaiah 14, the sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearfulness has seized the hypocrites. I've talked a lot about the hypocritical love, and that's not where you want to be. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Okay, this is God coming as a consuming, devouring fire. Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Because when God comes and He abides here, when Christ comes to purge this earth of wickedness, it's like an eternal fire. Wickedness will never abide here again. So because those fires are burning forever. It's the eternal fire, the eternal burnings, the everlasting fire, the fire that's never quenched, because it will never exist. It's similar to how Christ is that eternal sacrifice. I mean, He's not, dying and being resurrecting over and over and over, but the effect of His act goes on for eternity. And that's what this is saying, is the effect of God coming and burning away all sin and all wickedness and ultimately destroying death is something that will have effectiveness for eternity. It's never coming again. Okay, he who walks righteously, this who's going to be able to stand in these burnings, we're all going to be seasoned with fire, all of us. So this is who's going to stand and speaks uprightly. He who despises the gain of oppressions, who gestures with his hands refusing bribes, who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. He will dwell on high. His place of defense will be the fortress of rocks, and God is our rock. Bread will be given him, the word, the truth. His water will be sure, the Spirit of God. So this is who's going to stand. So you want to be one of those that can stand in the tribulation. So you got to put on those wedding garments, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And in 1 Peter 1:2, he says he's writing to the elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father in sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Jesus Christ. And again, this obedience is so important. It's obedience to that God's counsel to you individually. So what happens is in your life right now, when you're really being still and listening, there's areas in your life that you know you should be doing something different. There's something deep in your spirit, okay? And the reason that, and you're sensing that that's what God wants you to do, but you don't. You justify, you rationalize, you say, well, I'm forgiven, or grace covers me, or you just feel it's too difficult. Ultimately, you don't know God and you don't trust him. That's why you're not obeying him. Because if you obeyed him in that little thing, you would see that that really leads to life, and what you're doing leads to death. It's actually causing pain and hardship in your life. God's love does not bring harm to your life. He wants to bring you joy and peace and an abundant life. Okay, so if you are not living in that, then it's because you are following your own ways. And the grace of God is that he can come to us in our sin. I mean, obviously you can look at yourself and say, you've got all this sin. But because of Christ, God can come so intimately because we're forgiven and work with us and say, okay, I'm going to help you to leave this sin behind and walk in the paths of righteousness. That's the grace. It's not that we just go do whatever we want. It's that now we can walk with God. He can come so intimately, and as he teaches us the truth, we become a part of him. So we're actually walking by his power. It's a very interesting dynamic. So take that little area, and it'll probably be something too, because God often starts with something that's easier for you to trust him in, okay? And so you'll trust him in that little thing, and you'll see the fruit of it. That, wow, look at the life that brought. And you'll see the wisdom in his counsel. And so you'll be able to go back and see how you following God brought a very good result. And how when you're following yourself, it did not. So God's going to continue this process, and that's going to build your trust in him. And the more that you can trust God, the more that you're going to be able to face the harder things, the more deep-rooted lies and sins and issues in your life. So that when God says, you know what, this is really not what I want you to be doing, you'll be able to walk and follow him. So in this process, this is how you're putting on the wedding garments. And 1 Peter 1:5, it says, talking about, again, to these people who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. This is your salvation, is getting that new mind, and putting on these garments, because you'll be able to stand in the everlasting burnings, and you'll be able to be married to Christ and actually have such an amazing union with him and be one with him, so that you're always operating in righteousness. So as you continue this daily process of tuning into his voice, obeying it, following it, seeing the fruit, growing in trust, you're going to be sowing those garments. And that's what God's going to be giving you, and that's your salvation. And that's why it's so important, because these are the last times. And I want to read in verse 7, it says that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. The day of the Lord is also the revelation of Jesus Christ. He's going to reveal himself for you as he truly is. And if you have been going through this process, that is what you're going to receive. It's going to be a praise and honor and glory versus shame and bitterness and outer darkness and all these other things. Because there is, when he comes, there's definitely the separation that happens. If you don't have the oil in your lamp, if you haven't been preparing these garments of righteousness by tuning into God and following in those little acts of obedience. And again, it's very important to follow it individually for your life, because what may be right for you in a certain circumstance may be different from somebody else in their circumstances. For example, God is going to divide certain families, divide you from certain people. Other people he's going to have you cling to. You know, that's the thing about the love of God. It is so pure and perfect, and it's different from the love that we've learned in this world. So you can't think you know what loving is. You need to listen to God and learn to listen to that voice, because that counsel is going to be very different from the wisdom of the world and the love of the world. So you've got to have that humility and understanding that difference. I also want to read this verse that I just love. It's in 1 Peter 3:21, and it says, "There is also an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ." And again, that's another sense of what this voice feels like. It's like you've got a good conscience. Jesus cleansed our conscience. That's what he did. So it's like you can start tuning in, and that's how it feels. It's like, okay, this is the way that I should go. And as you obey that voice and that prompting and that sense in your spirit, you're going to learn more what that sounds like. And you're going to understand what that is, and you're going to learn to trust it, so that the moment you feel it, you're going to be able to act on it. But at first, you're going to have to learn and try it out and get used to hearing that and following it, because you're like a baby that needs to learn. And so you start on the milk, but then you're going to grow. But that's kind of the process that you have to go through. And again, in 1 Peter 1:10, it says, "Of this salvation, the salvation to come in the end, the prophets have inquired and searched carefully, who prophesied of the grace that would come to you." This is the grace that is being poured out, that to put your hope in, is that it's not about you doing this on your own effort. And that is so important to understand. This is about you connecting with God, his power filling you, walking by his power, because you're becoming unified to his spirit. That's what helps you to walk in these righteous acts. So start listening, tune in to those promptings. Don't rationalize them and justify them. And again, if you're in this religion that's holding on to these false doctrines, that is going to make it very difficult for you to hear those promptings, because you're going to justify them away. So that's why it's like you got to purge your life of all that stuff and just give your time to really start tuning in into the voice of God. It is so important. Till next time, keep stirring the deep. It's the one thing that changes everything else.